Let me start with a question. How many ducks do you see? Show me with your hands where this is 0, this is 10, how many ducks you saw. Great. I think most people saw 10. How many rabbits did you see? Some people saw rabbits, but I'd say the majority of people are looking a bit confused at this point. Let's run the film again. This time, count the rabbits. Our brains are not the rational, objective things we might want them to be. Instead, our decisions, our choices, our analysis is affected by our own experiences, by our own thinking patterns, by the way an issue or event is framed. If we only look for ducks, we're unlikely to see rabbits. I became fascinated by how it is we think and why it is we make the decisions we do a few years ago when I started researching my new book, Eyes Wide Open. I dug into the economics literature, my field, but also the literature in neuroscience, in psychology, in information science, in complexity studies, trying to piece together what it takes to make smart decisions. And I interviewed some of the smartest decision makers out there, from hedge fund honchos to Hollywood producers, from ER doctors to fighter pilots, trying to piece together what it takes to make smart decisions in complex times. And what I want to do this afternoon is share with you just 6 insights from my research, 6 insights that should help us be able to see ducks and rabbits. The first, and I'm aware of the irony here because I am a professor, is that we shouldn't rely on experts entirely because they frequently get things wrong. Who's this? Alan Greenspan, exactly. Just a few months before the financial crisis struck, Greenspan was talking about how derivatives would make the global economy safer, and how many of my colleagues predicted the financial crisis. So few. In fact, Philip Tetlock's seminal research on experts, which looks at 62,000 expert predictions over a 16-year period, discovered that experts did no better than a monkey randomly throwing a dart on a board. And yet we cede so much power to experts. In fact, we put them up on pedestals. We give up our independent decision-making capabilities and hand it over to them. This sounds extreme, but there was a recent fascinating study done at Emory University where they scanned volunteers in a functional MRI scanner, scanned their brains whilst they contemplated an expert's advice. In this case, it was a financial expert. The results were extraordinary. As they contemplated the advice, it was as if the independent decision-making part of their brains switched off. And they just accepted, followed what the expert said. We need to keep our brains switched on, which means taking responsibility ourselves for becoming smarter information hunter-gatherers. Essential, if we're to do this, is for us to actively seek out, it turns out, discordant and divergent points of view, which isn't what we tend to do. In fact, we tend to seek out information that corroborates, echoes, confirms what it is we already believe. When we get that sort of information, we get a dopamine rush, similar to as if we'd eaten chocolate had sex, or fallen in love. It feels good. Yet, innovation, creative thinking, is understanding that this comes about not only from the creation of ideas, but also from their destruction. We need to take our cue from Abraham Lincoln, who famously had a team of rivals, who famously surrounded himself with really smart people with very different points of view, in the knowledge that in that cut and thrust of discussion, better insights would come about than JFK, who made the notoriously terrible decision to back the CIA invasion of the Bay of Pigs with an environment, with a group of people who echoed what he had to say. It was a classic example of groupthink, of yes people. We need to have people who are challenging our own points of view. Essential as well when we're thinking about what kind of teams we need to build in these complex, fast-moving times is to actively create teams that are defined by difference. Again, we don't tend to do that. We tend to create teams which look more often than not like that. Yet there's a vast body of research now which shows of how much better decision-making is when teams are made up of people of different gender, different ethnicity, different age. Fascinating research on age diversity within groups being determinants for success. Skills, different skill sets also proven to be essential for making smart decisions. Does anyone know where Kate was last month? Bletchley, yeah, Bletchley. Bletchley was an example of a place that really took this idea of difference, people with different skills, to heart, charged with cracking the Enigma code, a code so difficult to crack that the odds of cracking it were estimated to be 150 million to 1. The powers that be created a group of people with very different skills. They didn't only have mathematicians and engineers, people you'd expect. The team comprised also of antiquarian booksellers, linguists, Egyptologists, crossword puzzle enthusiasts. It was a ragtag group, and it delivered. Winston Churchill, when he went to Bletchley, supposedly said, "Well, I told you not to leave any stone unturned. I didn't think you'd take me so literally." But it was the difference within that group that is thought to have played the critical role in enabling them as a team to crack the code. Another insight from my research, especially important in these fast-moving times, is for those of us who have had success already, not to be blinded by what has worked for us in the past. Hands up if you ever had a Nokia phone. Hands up if you still have a Nokia phone today. Wow. I mean, Nokia is an example of a company that was blinded by its own success. They were the mobile phone company. Throughout the 90s, people had Nokia phones. We all had our Nokia phones. In fact, 4 out of every 10 handsets sold globally in the 90s was a Nokia handset. But in 2007, when Apple introduced the iPhone, Nokia was caught sleeping on the job. It turned out that engineers at Nokia had actually developed a whole host of features very similar to an iPhone. Touch screen, colour screen, kind of swoop type features. But when they took it to management, management wasn't interested. They said, no, we know what makes us successful. What makes us successful is a phone that you can drop from 7 foot and the screen doesn't crack. Well, that wasn't what people, it turns out, really valued. History is not an army on a forward march. What worked yesterday may well not work tomorrow, especially in a world as fast-moving as ours, especially in a world as complex as ours. The fifth insight is that if we're going to make smart decisions, we have to get into decision-making shape. I know that John Coates is going to talk more on this, some aspects of this, but here I wanted to say we need to get better at understanding what affects our decision-making. Our emotions, they really affect our decision-making. If we're feeling anxious, we become more tunnel-visioned. If we're feeling scared, we become more risk-averse. If we're feeling happy, we're more prone to take risks. It's why we typically see a spike in a country's stock market if their national football team wins a big game. Something we don't need to worry about here, sadly. Our physical state affects our decision-making too. Sleep. If you haven't had enough sleep, lots of research coming out now, terrible for decision-making. President Clinton talks about how the worst decisions he ever made in office were when he hadn't had enough sleep. Food. I'm the speaker after lunch, so I need to think about how this affects me. Food, if you haven't eaten, or if you have eaten, affects your decision-making. Fascinating research done on judges in Israel, people you would think of as being super rational decision-makers. They looked at why judges granted parole. Was it because of the ethnicity of the applicant, the gender, the type of crime? No, the single biggest determinant was whether the judge had recently eaten. Seriously, if you went before the judge just before their 10 a.m. snack, disaster. 0% chance of getting parole. If you went just after that snack, shot up to 65%. Just before lunch, terrible time again, fell down, 10% chance. Just after lunch, shot up to 65%. Our state of sexual arousal, it turns out, also affects our decision-making. Fascinating research done in Canada with male undergraduate students. They showed them one of two images, either a Victoria's Secret model or a neutral object, a rock. They then gave them a financial decision to make. The guys who'd been looking at the Victoria's Secret model made significantly worse financial decisions than the guys who'd been looking at the rock. Seek out divergent and different perspectives. Get into decision-making shape. Don't be blinded by your own success. Don't rely on experts to get it right. These are important lessons, but all these take time. Can everyone who actively carves out at least 30 minutes every day just to think, please stand up? Wow. We don't have time, do we? We're drowning in emails. We're bombarded with our own to-do lists. We're in this state of continuous response where the immediate crowds out the urgent. This is even people in this room, people who are making strategic decisions, who have other people who are following their thoughts. And yet, if there's one thing that every one of the smartest decision makers I interviewed in my research did, was they actively carved out time to think. Shall I share a tip with you that they shared with me? A way to not be stressed and carve out this time? It was so easy. Just put in your diary, TTT, time to think. Some of them actually put in Project X so that their PA thinks they're doing something really important. They all do it. Doesn't have to be 30 minutes a day. It's not that you have to sit at your desk thinking. It can be thinking time when you're at the gym. It can be thinking time when you go for a walk. But if we are to innovate, if we are to imagine, if we are to be Apple and not Nokia, if we are to see ducks as well as rabbits, we need time and space to think, to imagine, to dream. Thank you.
So, Noreena,
Yes.
you're smart, you're busy.
Yes.
Completely honest answer here. How much have you changed your own behaviour based on the research you did for the book?
So much. It makes me realise kind of how flawed I was as a decision maker before. And I thought I was a good decision maker, and I advised a lot of people on big decisions. So I'm so much better at noting things like my emotional state. So thinking, oh, I'm waiting for blood test results. That's making me anxious. Because it turns out it's not that you can't have emotions. That's the good news. It's all about noting them. I've definitely got better at the carving out time to think. I mean, I literally do it before I check my emails in the morning. So, have that time, and I find it really valuable for thinking strategically. I am much more careful about advice and information that resonates and kind of being drawn to that. I'm much more prone now to seek out information that jars, to at least to be able to interrogate that. So, yeah, I think I've learned a lot.
Are we allowed to multitask? Can we brush our teeth and use that as our TTT time? I'm just trying to be efficient here.
Yeah, I think if it's not if it's a routine task,
Okay.
walking, brushing teeth, yeah.
Everybody go back home tonight and spend like 12 minutes brushing your teeth. Good decision to get Noreena Hertz. Thank you.